back to the Berg Podcast. Thanks for joining us today. With me today is Dan.
Hey, everybody.
And our guest today is Denny Howell.
Hey, everybody.
And Denny, could you just give us a brief introduction? Who is Denny Howell?
Sure. I grew up in the area. I grew up out in East Fallowfield in Coatesville, and I went to Coatesville High School, stayed in the area for college, went to Drexel University. I grew up kind of out in the country a little bit, so I commuted every day to Drexel from Coatesville on a train because I just couldn't live in the city. So I went there for civil engineering, stayed in the area, worked for my co-op employer at Drexel. There's a co-op program you work for. I worked for them, was very close with them, and then I started my firm in 1999.
That's cool. Actually, I didn't know the Drexel connection. My son is a fifth year at Drexel. On his third co-op, he's done a bunch of the similar things. So,
and that's cool. Today, my son actually went to Drexel as well.
Yeah.
He sat next to me in the car all day going to school and heard about engineering in Drexel. So he went to Drexel, and just today, before I came up here, he got word he passed his PE exam, so he's now licensed engineer. And
that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's really
just got
exciting.
official word this morning.
Congratulations!
Yeah, congratulations. And it feels like a lot of hard work paying off when you get that kind of news, right? I mean, a lot of years spent on trying to get there. So.
Absolutely, and my daughter's a landscape architect, works with us as well, so we're kind of keeping it
close.
Yep,
I like
keeping
that.
it close.
Yeah, very cool. So.
Yeah, and that's one of the things with Denny that's interesting about Denny is he's come from just, most engineering firms, they're an engineering firm, and then you have your survey firms and you have all different firms, and you've really as of late over the last maybe 5-7 years, you've taken DL Howell from being an engineering firm that everybody sort of knew or a survey firm and really expanded it and made a what I think is a pretty impressive footprint with some of the things that you've taken on and where that takes you. What was the plan? What was the thinking there going into it? Or were you more like Ford and I, where there wasn't a plan necessarily? There was Brian trying to warn us we shouldn't do things, and we did it anyway.
It was pretty much that. It was actually the plan was no plan. We were just kind of trying to give good service and grow. And the one thing that we kind of saw, at least that I kind of felt strongly about, was that we would be more successful if we didn't continue to bolt on other disciplines to the engineering company. That, for instance, my survey firm would thrive better if it was its own surveying firm that we marketed itself and independently. So we don't really, that's why we run so many different firms. We don't just bolt on different disciplines to our company. So I think doing that, especially with surveying, has allowed us to be one of, if not the largest survey company in the area or in the state. We have about 40 people in it.
That's awesome. We actually just talked about that last week. We were talking about not being silos. Let's let other things happen and partner with them as opposed to trying to do everything ourselves. And it's a concept that's worked well for us as well. Yeah.
And my niece is my CFO, and she was just recently questioned about how hands-on I am in the company. And she said, my uncle is actually very hands-off. He lets us run and do our own things. And I really do try to stay out of everybody's hair and let them keep, growing on their own and support them and things like that.
That's cool.
Very cool. And that sort of, that speaks to the way Ford operates. And it can be, we've actually found it to be unnerving to people at times. That people come in and they think they want autonomy. They think they'd like to operate in a scenario where, they have the autonomy to make decisions and they're empowered. And then they get into that situation and you realize that for virtually your entire life, you were micromanaged. And you didn't like the micromanaging, but you don't necessarily know how to operate autonomously. And so that's something we've had to adjust to is when we bring people in to sort of facilitate them developing that comfort level with being autonomous. Yeah. Because it's not, at least for us, it's not as easy as it seems. It seems like it'd be a really easy plan, and it's not. It doesn't work out that way sometimes.
No, but finding those people that are comfortable kind of just being given a long leash, if no leash at all, and let them kind of develop on their own. And, we're certainly there for them and we don't want to micromanage, but finding that personality that can actually exist on its own. They're almost like they're mini entrepreneurs in the sense that all of my senior level engineers, that they develop and maintain their own clients. Yeah. They work on their own invoices, and that's how we want it. But we want to try to find those people that thrive in that environment. Right. And there's not a lot of them that do that.
No, that's what we find too. It takes the right people. I mean, I think a lot of people are conditioned, unfortunately, to be told what to do every step of the way, and I look at it, I said earlier before we started talking that I coach high school lacrosse, and, a big part of coaching, whether it's inside of business, in sports, is like getting people to understand how to make decisions in real time and not necessarily sit and wait for the next thing to happen or sit and wait for someone to tell them the next step that has to take place. Because if you're waiting for the next thing to happen or to be told to do something else in business and in sports, you're probably already too late for what's about to happen.
Correct.
Yeah. So
yeah.
You talked about you're roughly on the surveying side, roughly 40 people.
Correct.
Was that all organic growth?
That was all organic growth.
Yeah.
Yep.
So how long? Like, give me kind of the timeline. So you get out of college, you start your own firm right away? Or?
No, I got out of college in 1993.
Okay.
Went and worked for E.B. Walsh and Associates in Exton, which is my old mentor, Ted Jackomas. Worked there for about 6 years. I left in 1999. I was 29 years old. My son was actually born the week before I started my company, so I really had no option to mess up or screw up anything.
Failure was not an option.
It was not an option. So we started in 99. And at that time, it was just me and one guy, Joe Rosella. We were just doing engineering. We didn't have any survey component. But we added survey a couple of years later. And then and we kind of grew that as a survey engineering firm, which was the traditional model, the way most of our competitors are. And then we kind of broke off and started to do them independently back in, I'd say, 2015, 2016.
Okay.
And does that correspond with when you really started to grow as well? That's about the window 2015 where you started to acquire other companies?
It is, and I had I hadn't even thought that there was even a thing out there that existed of buying companies. And when I had a friend approach me with a firm in Annapolis about acquiring his firm, it was really nothing that I even thought existed. Like, you didn't buy another company, but he was a good friend. We knew him well, and that was our first one. It was called Train Engineering. And kind of from there, it kind of grew, and we kind of started to see the opportunities out there.
Yeah, very cool.
So when you're looking at growing, you have done an interesting combination of organic versus also buying and acquiring other companies and then merging them in. The thing I thought was interesting about it is one of our core values is act like an owner, and one of the things Ford preaches that. And if you look at us, a lot of us have had, in one variation or another, our own businesses in the past. And so he looks for that. So I did want to ask you, I did want to sort of talk that through. When you're acquiring companies, is it personnel most times, right? Because, I mean, realistically, at this point, everybody in this area knows DL Howell, right? They know Howell Engineering.
Yeah.
They just do. I mean, there's a few companies around. Everybody knows you have a good reputation. But so at this point, are you trying? Is it to get work or is it to get people? Is it, what are you looking for when you do this?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's really to get people. One of the biggest decisions and best decisions we made about maybe close to a year and a half ago was to hire an internal talent acquisition specialist, a recruiter, for if you will, and she's helped tremendously. And to recognize that we need to be in a perpetual state of hiring all of the time. We just do. Getting work is always a challenge, but we seem to do that well. But getting the work done, getting things done timely, and finding the good, you're looking for a needle in a stack of needles. So we're always looking for the best out there. And we try to find the best all the time. We might not find always, but we do a good job of developing them into the best. So yeah, we're definitely looking for people for the most part.
Yeah, and it's funny because we find that almost everything we do at this point is people driven, right? Or people focused, I should say. Even down to the podcast or our social media presence, and we'll have people reach out to us and try and get us to a point where we're like, well, you're trying to advertise because you're working, you could do this better to get more work. And I was like, none of this is about the work. Yes, we need to have a certain amount of work to get it done. And sometimes we have enough, sometimes we have too much, and sometimes we don't have enough. And that's the way it goes based on schedules and how things break. But the reality is almost everything we do is based on trying to make sure that the general people out there that might be interested in working for Berg understand who we are as people, who we are as a company, what we stand for, what we want to be, and then trying to present that in the best possible light in hopes of bringing in more solid people. Because the only way we're going to be able to do this work and grow is to add additional people. We can't, you just can't continue to do it on your own. And, it's a bad feeling when you delegate and realize that you delegated it to someone who's not capable or willing and not trainable, right? And you said about development. And that's a big piece. I mean, it's something that we're struggling with a little bit right now with a couple different people, is just developing them and going from them wanting to do something or thinking they want that responsibility to actually wanting it and actually being able to perform.
Yeah. Yeah, I stick with developing people for a long time. So I've had lots of people that have come to us and they weren't 1/10 what they are now, but they've certainly they've stayed with it. If they're going to stay with it, we're going to stay with it as well. Our business isn't an easy one. I would say no one's ever happy when I'm in town. So when you come in to work in our profession, you have to know that you're always going to be on the hot seat. Your clients are highly demanding. When you do township meetings at nighttime, no one's happy to see me pull up into the parking lot. They know I'm bringing kids or traffic or stormwater. So to the younger engineers, we're like, look, you need to have thick skin. You're going to be out there and no one's going to be high-fiving you and hugging you when you come into the room at night. And but there's a way that you can do it where you can earn people's respect, and you need to just stick with it. So I always say, like, if you stick with it with us, we will stick with it with you, and it will be hard for a while. It'll just be hard learning the process. But we don't ever have someone come in and for 2 or 3 months they get distracted or they're turned off by it and say, well, we'll just move on. We want to stick with them on it and get them through it.
Yeah, and you said something funny there, and we talk about it at times. Like, engineers at times get a bad rap, right? For whether it's between the owner, the contractor, kind of get stuck in the middle maybe at times, between what was designed versus what shows up when the project starts.
It always works on paper, Denny. Everyone I've ever seen, it works on paper.
Anything can work.
Anything can work on paper.
Yeah, but that's interesting to hear you say that about kind of having to have that thick skin, because when you show up, it's usually because you're either trying to solve a problem or fix a problem, right? So you're telling someone there's a problem, or you're trying to solve a problem that they already know about.
Yeah, yeah. I almost feel like a lawyer. You never call your lawyer unless there's something wrong, right? So they never hear the good in anything. Well, when my phone rings, it's 99% of the time because something is not right. Yeah. No one's usually calling me to say, "Hey, really glad that you're doing this." It's usually there's a problem with the project. It's a problem in the field, and if you just wake up every day realizing that's going to be your day, that's your normal day. Your normal day should be calamities that you can then address and fix and repair. And if you like doing that, then you're good for us. But if you don't like that, then you will not thrive in our environment.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that, because it's I find that exact thing with, I'm not saying the only time I call Denny is when there's a problem, right? That's not true.
It's not true.
That's not true. Okay. But if it is like genuine,
I'm ready.
But if it is genuinely work related, like I'm actually calling you, I usually lead in by saying, like, I know you don't want to hear from me about this, but I have to just, like, I'm going around to everybody now. I've heard it. I need you to understand what's going on from our perspective so we can address it, because something has gone sideways, right? Because it's not the plans. Like, at the end of the day, we all know. I was at yesterday. I was at an event for Camino, and you guys are working at Camino, I believe, for us as well.
Yep.
And so I'm at Camino, and I was with Pierce Keating and Pierce Keating Jr. And we're there, and I'm talking to them, and they were talking about how the plans were, and Pierce said something really funny. He said, so the funniest thing about construction is you have a plan, and then at some point you get to an actual thing. And you either look at it and say, this is, either way, he was positive about it, that like it's great and it's done and you're happy with it. But you either look at it and say, this is not exactly what I thought it was going to be, or I have no idea how we got here, considering what I know happened between that drawing and this building.
Yeah.
But very rarely do you hit a project where everything just goes exactly as planned. Like it's not how it goes. And so it creates this division that we all have to work through, where, the field, in a similar way where a field staff can get upset with an office staff because they don't understand. That's what happens with engineers and the actual, construction, site work, and everybody else, building everybody, is there's this drawing. With buildings, I guess it tends to be more of the architects that are but for us, it's the civil engineers. And it's to say, like, okay, yes, that is what you drew, but I can't build that. And Denny, the funniest one that I had was, and Brian remembers this, is we were out. And it's fine. I'll even say it was SCS, and it was Lisa. It was out at a project at Greater Lebanon. And we're in a meeting, sitting in, and they have their prints up on the screen, and she is just arguing with me about this print. And I'm like, I understand what you're saying, that it works on the print, but if we could just go outside and you just walk the hill, you're going to see this won't work. And she was like, Dan, it works. And we're looking at the paper, and it was like two people who weren't speaking the same language. Like, I just wanted her to walk on the hill, and she just wanted me to look at the plans. And so Jim, who's the engineer for the authority, said like, okay, I acknowledge this works on the plans. Dan, do you acknowledge this works on the plans? I was like, I acknowledge it on that piece of paper. Right. I can build that exact thing. And then we went out there, and he said, okay, Lisa, can you acknowledge that he can't build what you want him to build given this scenario? And she was like, okay, I can acknowledge he can't build it. I was like, okay, so neither of us have the answer. Right? Like, I don't have the answer. I mean, I have an idea of what we can do, but I don't know if it, I believe it will work, but I don't know if it meets every regulation that you had to design to. And so it's a really interesting dance between engineers and the civil contractor, because one person will have a really solid handle of the specs and know why they drew it. And then the other person knows what the existing conditions are that they're trying to deal with and other things around it. And that dance, when you find a dance partner that works, you tend to stick with them then, because you're like, okay, I can work with these guys. They understand where I'm coming from. And hopefully the engineer feels the same way.
Exactly. I mean, I can tell you right now that we feel the same exact way with different site contractors that we work with. We know ones where we can work with them, because there's always going to be a problem. If, the 2 or 3 years of work that we put in to get the job approved, when the young engineer finally gets approval and wants to breathe a big sigh of relief, we're like, don't breathe very long, because once they put a shovel in the ground, all new problems are going to come up. There's, instead of being township problems and engineering problems, they're going to be field problems, and you're going to need to be able to react. And again, you need to just embrace that. If you want to be that person that can say, I'm ready for new problems today, and I'm ready to be that guy that you come to, or lady, and solve that problem, then you'll be good. If not, that field process will torment you to the end of time.
I feel like that happens mostly in civil. Is that true, or does it happen in really every aspect of construction?
I'm sure it happens to the GCs on building the buildings and building the architecturals. Luckily, we're all lucky. Once we go vertical, we're kind of out of the equation. But this actually goes back to why we do stakeout. So most mistakes and hiccups and problems that we do on the plans, they will show their ugly head in the field when we're staking them out. And 99% of the time, I can fix that problem like that if I get a chance to redraw something before, pipes in the ground and things like that.
Right.
Once that other stuff's done, now my mistake involves ripping things out, and money's involved, and
moving things.
And, and it's ugly.
And we're in the same boat. Like, it's, we really try to look for projects where we can have some involvement ahead of time in design, so we can say like, okay, well, did you think of this? Because it's there can be a large dollar impact in something that really makes no difference. You know what I mean? There's no difference in effectively what we've done or what the result is, but it can be very different. Even again, Camino's another one. Camino again, that when they designed that sewer line that deep, like every geotech report said don't go below 7 feet. And there was a way to get there not below 7 feet, but they didn't elect to go that route. And and so now there's repercussions to that. And fortunately, the owner's being very understanding about it. Yeah. Because he has, they're experienced builders. But it's you gotta think about it, because once you start to go, once the approvals are approved, once everything's stamped and it's sealed, and you got to build it that way. Now you got to stick to the township's plan, or you need a change.
And that's one of the big collisions, is some of these revisions may make sense in the field, and now it's kind of too late, because you're not just going to make the change depending on where you are in the field easily. You could be potentially going back to the township for some kind of revised thing. But I did want to say earlier, Dan, when you mentioned that cost, dirt has become such a large thing these days. In my old days, and I'm 55, we would design plans, we would grade them as best we could. They would go out to you guys, you would ag tech it, you would tweak your benchmark a foot or whatever, and we were none the wiser. We were, no one called and said, Denny, the dirt doesn't work, so everything's good.
Just did it. Right?
Now dirt has become an absolute science with machine control and 3D modeling and droning everything and hold down plans. We've really evolved into a company that models dirt like it's a science.
Yeah. Well, because everything has gotten more expensive.
Yep.
Yeah. But the idea of having to haul off dirt and then find somewhere to get rid of it, and the more stormwater management that goes in, that's especially below grade,
right,
the more dirt that you have to manage, and there's not these giant open fields anymore. Many projects are, even an open field is surrounded by stuff. Right. So you just can't lose dirt the way you used to. And so now you're in a position where you got to take it somewhere, and then it costs money. You know what I mean? And there's nothing worse than paying to get rid of something you could have kept on
You could have
site.
spread around. And then even worse, there's the dirt part of the overall site, but then once some of the national home builders come in, they want their lots to then be held down to a level so that when they dig their basements and they put in their A model or B model, that individual lot then will balance.
Yeah.
So we're not only making the whole site balance, we're trying to do the hold down to make each lot balance.
Right.
Because the minute they have to move extra dirt, someone's pointing a finger at somebody, and the developer at the time saying it's not on me. The home builder saying we're paying for a lot that's been held down to an elevation where we don't want to bring dirt from one lot to another one. So it becomes you're under a microscope for dirt.
I think especially on some of those national home builder situations, because like they want to dig a basement for X number of dollars, and if it costs more than X number of dollars, the project starts to not make sense.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well,
so
and they're not going to move. Like it
will only cost.
It
X
will
number of
be
dollars.
dug for that amount of dollars. So then somebody's upset because
Yes.
And if you got to bring dirt back in, it is those sites are becoming very, years ago you look back and they were like the cowboys, you know what I mean? They could just go in there and rip and tear, and they're going to build it and they'll figure it out.
Right.
Now it's just not that way anymore. When you look at some of the local guys who are really good at this, do this every day. I mean, it is a science what they're doing. The way that they manage the sites and the dirt and the road cut and the hold down. You're not just walking in there with a dozer blading everything off to get it flat and putting utilities in the ground and then letting somebody figure it out.
We've on more than one occasion had to fly our drone after things were graded off to get a model of what the site was graded to defend our position. If there's some dirt left over and there's a pile of fill of 8, 10, 12,000 yards, I need to then defend myself and show that, hey, you're off. I had a recent project where like the whole site was off by about 0.3, and we don't know whether they held down from the top of topsoil elevation or they held down below it, but you take that little bit of fill across that whole entire property, and lo and behold, that equaled that pile of dirt that was sitting there that everyone was wondering,
where
who's going to pay to get rid of this?
Yep.
Or spread it around.
Yeah, well,
it's become a science. And then the other thing that you guys are having to deal with is stormwater.
That's what I was just going to say. How bad does stormwater and the way it's being managed now impact that? Because I don't come from a construction background.
Yeah.
And I deal with my own little stormwater nightmare in my backyard.
You don't want to go in. Do not volunteer to involve yourself in Brian's
very
situation.
regular basis. But yeah, I got to imagine that with the way stormwater management has changed, that has to have become even more of a hoop and nightmare to deal with.
Yeah, and certainly it's almost become political because areas are getting flooded out, and there's obviously huge ramifications and costs. I've sat on the board of the Chester County Water Resources Authority for about 14 years, and we oversee all the dams in the county. One of them being the Hibernia Dam, which is a flood control device. But we've long debated whether or not the 100-year storm is going to be redefined. Not from a standpoint of its overall rain, but we don't seem to be, everyone says we get a 100-year storm every few months, Denny, but we really don't. What we're getting is these high intense storms where we're getting the rain over a much shorter period of time.
Right.
So it isn't that we're getting 7.2 inches of rain in 24 hours, which is that definition of that storm. We're getting like 3 or 4 or 5 inches of rain in a half an hour.
Yeah.
And nothing's designed for that right now.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting point that you're making. So Dylan Clemis, Dylan went to like the civil engineering program at Penn College, and Dylan's a project manager for us. And Dylan was talking about that when he was in school doing his capstone project, that they started talking about that they would likely at some point in the near future adjust, and it would stop being the 100-year storm and it would be like a 500-year storm, or they would adjust the benchmark of what a 100-year storm was. But you bring up an interesting point because we talk about it in that exact fashion, but I never really thought about it that way. That we talk about the fact, I heard yesterday in like the Kennett, West Grove, that area, they got absolutely crushed when that storm blew through. Mm-hmm. And I heard a number which I can't believe is true, but it is the number I heard, that it had rained like 5.3 inches in like 45 minutes or something. It was a rate of 7.2 an hour.
Yep.
And it was like, okay, there is nothing built for that. There's nothing that's going to, it's not going to hold. There's nothing's going to hold. Not the basins, not the ENS, nothing.
Nothing, and therein lies the problem. Nothing is designed for that. I mean, in our world of designing 100-year storms, when people are like, Denny, we get a 100-year storm every few months, that's actually fine. It doesn't take the basins a few months to dewater. So if it dewaters in 24 or 48 hours, I'm ready for another 100-year storm to come in again.
Right.
And again, I mean, it's modeled and designed for that, but that's contemplating 7 inches of rain over a 24-hour period. You get 5 inches.
Yeah. It's the duration, not the quantity, right?
Exactly. It's the intensity.
Yeah.
Yep. It's like pouring a bucket of water out in 2 seconds rather than just pouring that same bucket out over an hour. There's a big difference to how it gets modeled out. So it's going to have to change because we're just seeing more and more flooding. The question becomes then, all the infrastructure out there, the conveyance is not designed for that intense of a runoff. So modeling it is one thing, but conveying it to streams, and then therein lies the bigger problem. If you get to the streams, you're just making that stream crest even faster. Yep.
Yeah, faster.
Right. And that's what we've seen, right? Is a lot of attempt to hold water on site with these underground basins and other mechanisms. But at some point still, it's as exactly as you said, it's the duration.
Yeah.
Because yes, the basin could hold that much water. It just can't hold it that fast. And that becomes and just the way these storms roll in, I'm like I'm 50 years old. It didn't used to rain like this.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
It did not.
2 days, was it 2 days ago, 3 days ago when that other storm blew through? Yeah. Brad said it sounded like there was somebody with many, many pressure washers just firing rain at the building. Like it was just pouring. And then I live Chester Springs.
Sideways. I mean,
it was raining sideways, and right behind me, like Chester Springs Road, Horseshoe Trail, 401, Dewey's Lane, right there. I don't know what went through. You could title whatever you went through there, but there were trees down laying left and laying right, and they came down so fast they landed on the cars that were driving. Like that was a wicked storm when it blew through, and it was sunny 30 minutes earlier, and it was sunny 30 minutes later.
Yeah,
it's just rough. It's rough, and it impacts work for us a lot. Because
absolutely,
it only rained 30 minutes, but it might cost me a day or two because it's so much rain. Right. It had nowhere to go. It messes everything up. Even if we could, we likely can't work the next day other than maybe a little bit of cleanup. So you're talking that 30 minutes could cost us 2 days.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, the pressure washer thing though. Yesterday I was sitting in my son's office and it was getting dark outside and I was like, my God, it's like a pressure washer up against your window outside. Like I could see it. Yeah. It actually was Greg, our property manager, pressure washing the building outside. but for a second, I actually legitimately thought that's what it was. Yeah.
Given the storms we have, you thought it was reasonable.
Right.
Yeah. It seemed probable.
Yeah.
It actually is a pressure washer. Yeah.
Oh, well, that is a pressure washer.
Yeah. I feel like I'm starting to figure this out because it's so funny the way you just described that. All right. So 2 years ago, the homes that butt up against the basin in where we live, we finally convinced the borough that the design didn't match the plans, and so we had to pay for it, of course, because we're the property owners, and we got it all redone. And like 2 or 3 days ago, I think it was Monday, maybe it was end of last week, Thursday. There was one of these storms, 3 inches in 35 minutes, and so the water crushed the road in front of everyone's homes, and everyone's upset because we 2 years ago had to pay for this project. And I'm like, there's zero chance that the poor engineer who designed this thing to whatever the spec was 20, 30 years ago when these homes started going in ever had a chance to accommodate for that amount of water in that period of time. And I do feel like at times I can be the voice of reason now, having a little bit of construction experience. Right. I'm certainly not an expert. And the amount of knowledge I've gained, even just from dealing with my own little stormwater nightmare, is pretty tremendous. But I was like, that can't be possible. There's no chance that this ever could have accommodated that storm.
And from an engineering standpoint, though, one of the things that kills me is I live at the back end of a cul-de-sac. I'm the last house all the way in the back, and it drops off behind me back towards Chester Springs Road. And you never notice when things go right? You said it like nobody calls you and says, Denny, that was a great job. Right? But I am amazed at how well they manage the water in my cul-de-sac. Like you have my cul-de-sac's maybe a half a mile long. You got a quarter mile downhill coming at me. And Nothing ever happens. There's one inlet down there. They pick it up. Everything is pitched. Like I can see it. Everything is pitched to the yard, so it goes to the grass. They're not sending all the water. There's one spot in the back of my yard where it rushes out because it's around the trees. But you just don't appreciate it. The engineering that went into coming up with a way to put, whatever there is, 40, 30 houses on that street, have them all coming downhill, and the water does not blow out my house is just, I mean, it's a feat.
Well, we see all the flooding, but what we don't see are the stormwater facilities that are designed being overwhelmed.
Sure.
So they're not overtopping. It's just the volume of water that's being put onto the ground in that short period of time that's causing the problems. Like, we're not seeing the effects of these high intense storms overwhelming stormwater facilities, because at the end of the day, whether it's getting there quickly or over a long period of time, it's still a certain volume. So if that basin's designed for a 100-year storm at a certain volume, and you're getting not 7 inches of rain, but you're getting 5, then it's fine for the volume. It's really just the rate that's causing the problems, the rate that it's falling and the rate that it's being put out across the ground.
Well, another place I saw, I think I might have been talking to you or Dylan about it, was at Twin Valley High School at the top of the hill. And Scott has had us out there a few times to look at it, but I've never seen it in a full bore storm. And a couple weeks ago, there was one of these storms, and I was driving over that hill in just a driving rainstorm. And I realized, how old's Twin Valley as a school? Twin Valley's...
It's got to be.
I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, 20, 30 years?
I was going to say 40 or 50.
40? I think longer than that.
Okay,
yeah.
so...
I was there 30 years ago, I think.
Okay, so I mean, their stormwater is set up based on those sort of guidelines with not really retaining.
Yeah.
And as I came up the hill, I was like, no wonder why this is a problem. I was like, that basin is just kicking water straight. It's just got an outfall structure. It doesn't have an outfall structure. It has just an end wall.
Right.
It's just in and out.
Yeah.
I was like, so it would work fine, to your point, if it just rained constantly.
Right.
But at a reasonable rate. But I was going over it in one of those storms. It looked like a fire hose coming out of that thing. I was like, there's nothing that can be done to help that street other than figure out a way to disperse the water, to hold more water,
right,
so that you release it, to your point, at the rate that you want to release it. Because if you don't, that's where you are. It's going to blow all that water out, and then nothing's going to hold it.
Nothing's going to hold it.
Yeah.
No.
So
yeah,
there you go. I mean, that's a lot of stormwater talk for everybody.
It is. That's what keeps me in business, though. So.
We talk about trying to monetize like nature at this point, right? Like whether it becomes rain or sinkholes or whatever it means. Like we fill the gaps. We figure out what people need. You find solutions. Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand how we went from a drought to this. We went from a drought to where I heard Dylan claims we're ahead of Seattle now.
I don't know.
That we passed Seattle for rainfall this year. So we were in a drought.
That true? I don't know.
That's what he told me. We did, like that last storm that felt like the power washer. We passed Seattle.
Jeez.
So I was like, how did we? We had like no rain, and my wife gets so mad, but I said, I'll just take the drought. I'm fine. I'm fine. My grass can burn up. I'll take the drought.
Yeah. Yeah, we'd read the days. The phone rings off the hook the next morning.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. I'm sure. So, well, that feels like a pretty good place to wrap it up. So, thanks so much for joining us today, Denny.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your time.
It very much.
And folks, we hope you got something from this episode, and we hope you come back for another one. Thanks.